As a CIA asset, Susan Lindaur covered anti-terrorism at the Iraqi embassy in New York from 1996 up to the U.S. invasion in 2003. She provided advance warning of the events of September 11, 2001. Shortly after requesting to testify before Congress about pre-war intelligence, Susan became one of the first victims of the USA Patriot Act. She was accused under a secret indictment, convicted as a result of secret evidence, and imprisoned for a year without a trial or hearing. And after 5 years of the indictment still being open without any conviction or guilty plea, the Injustice Department dismissed all charges 5 days before Obama's inauguration. Susan is the author of Extreme Prejudice, The Terrifying Story of the Patriot Act and the Cover-Ups of 9/11 and Iraq, in which she tells of her experiences. She was with us a few weeks ago. You were so happy to hear from her that we brought her back. Susan Lindaur, welcome back to the Global Freedom Report.
Well, I'm delighted to be back, and I'm horrified by what's happening in Washington today. As you all know, the Senate and the House have passed a military bill that allows the military to detain American citizens.
Hang on, Susan. I got to pop the bubble on this. Okay, I think I'm probably the only one who's actually read any portion of this bill. Section 1032 of this bill, paragraphs 1 and 2, very, very specifically say this does not apply to American citizens, and this cannot apply to legal residents here either. So the original version of the bill.
Well, no, wait a minute. Here they're saying that it does apply to all citizens. It applies to all American citizens, and the key is that what they're saying is that it does not change.
The bill specifically, I have a copy of this section of the bill. The actual bill, S-1867, Section 1032, subsection A, paragraphs 1 and 2, specifically say this will not apply to citizens of the United States or legal residents.
Are you looking at the House bill or the Senate bill?
Senate bill.
Okay, the Senate bill, because I guess it's the House bill that has the other language. Here's what's happening. Here's what's happening. The House and the Senate have each passed 2 versions of the bill. And now they're getting together, and they're in closed-door sessions right now, and they've got 2 weeks to hammer it out, a compromise bill between the language between the two. And what we're being told here, what the ACLU and what the activists here are saying, is that this does apply. This allows the U.S. to extend its sovereignty throughout the world. And it allows the United States military to grab citizens anywhere on the planet if you are thinking, speaking, violent. You don't even have to, see, this is the crazy thing. Sedition is now defined as speech. Technically, everyone thinks of terrorism as requiring a violent conspiracy. But in fact, the Patriot Act and this bill here, my own story, show that these laws that they're passing are not about violent actions. It's about, it takes a very loose definition of what terrorism means. If you are Occupy Wall Street and you're challenging institutions and challenging how the government operates, you are engaged in a seditious activity according to these laws, and these laws authorize the United States government.
Wait a moment. How about we decide by our laws that any government that is engaged in this type of activity is engaged in a seditious activity? Let's just take them out then. Why not? We have more guns than they have.
Do you have more guns than the United States?
Yeah,
I think the whole world would have to go to war with the United States.
No,
I don't know if everybody.
There's a good 800 million firearms in the hands of private citizens in the United States.
Well, but see, here's the problem. What they're doing is they're setting up a code for martial law in the United States, and I will tell you that it is terrifying for me, because I had dedicated my entire life to my entire career my entire life. My entire career was dedicated to anti-terrorism and nonviolence. I was an anti-war activist, anti-sanctions activist. I worked to support back-channel dialogue to reduce tensions between countries, and I was hit with this law and thrown in prison on a Texas military base.
You know, you've just painted a very accurate, in my opinion, and bleak picture of the United States, but you cannot be the only former intelligence asset who has seen this. I'm of the firm belief that there are people who really, really want to do good for the country, who have special skills such as intelligence agents, or veterans, who see what's happening. So why isn't anybody standing up against it?
Oh, well, listen, Veterans for Peace is a wonderful international group that is made up of former military officers and personnel from conflicts going all the way back to Vietnam and Korea, who are trying to educate the public about the horrible costs of war. They're trying to provide support for young American servicemen and women who are returning from Iraq and Afghanistan who are so badly damaged, and trying to help them adjust to the civilian life again. But I need to talk about this law, because I don't want to get off on that point, because before the break you were saying that this does not apply to American citizens.
Not in the Senate version.
No, hold on. You are wrong about that. Let me just tell you that Senator Dianne Feinstein, that the bill you may have seen may have been an early version of it. Senator Feinstein forced an amendment that would have explicitly barred the military from detaining U.S. citizens without a hearing or trial. And that amendment failed, 45 to 55. I'm
aware of that, Susan. I'm aware of that.
Okay, the compromise that they reached, and this is what's scary, because this shows the power of the Patriot Act and why I want to talk about the Patriot Act today. The compromise they reached was that existing laws allowing detentions would not be affected by the new law. That there was an understanding that existing laws already take care of this problem. And this was supposed to be a way of consoling the public. But in fact, you should not be placated, because the irony is that this law that they're passing right now about indefinite detentions on military bases, in fact, repeats what is already in the Patriot Act. And most people think that this is new, and it is dreadful, because what it does is it transfers power away from the civilian courts to the military.
So, wait,
that's the big shift.
Let me interrupt you then. Let me ask you directly. Let's assume everything you're saying is right and that my interpretation is wrong. Okay, let's just assume that for a moment. And let's assume that this is exactly what they're trying to do. Why is my previous question irrelevant? Doesn't that mean it's time to overthrow an illegal government? Isn't that?
Well, sure it does. This is very scary. This is a very, very scary bill. But, yes. Oh, absolutely. And I want to talk today about where the differences are in the Patriot Act. But what is already happening in America is that they are expanding the definition of terrorism very broadly. And this bill codifies further what the Patriot Act has already started. Except that the difference is that it allows, the Patriot Act still recognizes the civilian court. So if you are, I was indicted on the Patriot Act, I was locked up in prison without a trial or hearing. I was locked up in a federal women's prison on a military base. And the military attempted, for example, to stop me from receiving family visitors and attorney visits. Because this was, and seriously, my uncle, who is an attorney with 40 years under the law, was fighting to get me out because my public defender had sold me out. And this is often what happens in the United States. You get the justice you can buy. And so my uncle jumped in, saved me, and showed up in court and began filing all kinds of petitions on my behalf. the military responded, because I was locked up inside a military base. The military said, well, you're not allowed to come into the base to visit Susan Lindaur. You are not allowed to have any face meetings with her. 3 times he drove 700 miles. That is approximately, I think, correct me please, 1,000 kilometers. 700 miles, I think, is 1,000 kilometers in each direction. And they would not let him onto the base. And so we had the option, because this was still a civilian case, we had the option. We did it. We grabbed it. He went to my judge, and he demanded that U.S. Marshals be standing by to escort him onto that military base, to compel the military to allow this attorney visit to occur. Now realize he was a family member as well. So he had the right to say, look, I'm just a family member. I just want to visit her. But they wouldn't let me have family visits either, because this is the military base. I was allowed to have phone calls. I was not locked up in solitary confinement. I was allowed to have exercise rights. I was allowed to watch television. These sorts of activities are all prohibited in a military setting. You are locked down 24 hours a day. You have no rights to communicate with your family. You have no rights to have attorney visits. You disappear off the planet.
In the first place, I won't allow that to go on the air. It's not true, because the USA Patriot Act, these military tribunals, are patently illegal, unlawful, unconstitutional, void, and invalid. What that means is, if you are held under one of these provisions, you are kidnapped. You are the victim of a crime. You are not, by any means, being deprived of rights. Your rights are being violated. And, you know, when you say things, when anybody says things like, well, the USA Patriot Act does this, it doesn't do anything. It is purely void and invalid against a free people. But the
problem is we're no longer free, because we are no longer free. Listen, you can see from my passion, and anybody who listens to my radio shows, I am a fighter. If anybody could beat the Patriot Act, you bring it to me, because I would take it. I would take it on, and I did take it on. The problem was, even though I'm not a passive person, I fought back, or they really would have screwed me. But the courts refused. But the problem was, there's no way to fight out of their system, because they refused. No, they refused to give me a hearing. When they refuse to give you a hearing, when the corporate media shuts you out and blocks out your story, there was no way at all. I remember, this is a story for all of you guys who know Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! I remember my beloved, wonderful companion, J.B. Field, calling me, I called him at the prison. I called him from the prison, and he was in tears. And men don't cry. Men like Jay don't cry. Some men cry. He does not. And he broke down sobbing. And I said, baby, what is it? And he said, Susan, Amy Goodman, BBB, refuses to cover your story. She says, oh, well, maybe it's for the best. I was like, you are kidding me. He sobbed. He sobbed into the phone, because the corporate media swallowed the propaganda. They refused.
This is why the only solution is an armed revolution. There is no possible peaceful way to remove tyrants from power. And that's what we have going on here. Now, hang on. Let's talk USA Patriot Act, because most of the provisions of this piece of garbage, fly in the face of the intent of the framers of the Constitution. Now, are you either directly or indirectly aware if there were any discussions or considerations as to the patently unconstitutional aspects of this act prior to its passage? Did anybody even talk about it?
I will tell you what happened. The Patriot Act is a 7,000-page document. Now, think about this. 7,000 pages that suddenly materializes out of a drawer, when it gets pulled out of a drawer that John Yoo apparently wrote in his spare time, 7,000 pages, that replicate the Soviet Communist Criminal Code that established the Stalin's KGB, Stalin's Gulag system. Okay, and it is hold on, and it is also replicating the Nazi enabling laws that set up the Gestapo. And people get really upset because people say, "Oh, you should never compare anything to the Holocaust because it's the Jews," yes, it's terrible what they did to the Jews. Mm-hmm. I'm not arguing that. This is not the point. The point is that the Patriot Act, the enabling laws, and the Soviet Criminal Code are the same law. They are thousands of pages of the exact same verbiage over and over and over again, just copied over from these previous laws. This is the Soviets. This is the Nazis. This is America. I would never have believed it. I'm a fighter. I am a fighter. When I was locked up in prison on a military base, they violated all of the following amendments of the Constitution, which I cherish the Constitution. I know my constitutional rights.
See,
I'm not uneducated. I have the best education in the world. Money can't buy education like mine. I have the best education. I have more than any other defendant. I'm on the high end of the scale. They took away my First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. They said that it was a crime. Free speech, nonviolent speech was a crime. They took away my Fourth Amendment rights under the Bill of Rights by having warrantless searches, allowing the government to go through my possessions at will, at random, and they did two of those to me. I lost my Fifth Amendment rights, which the Fifth Amendment in the United States is the right not to incriminate yourself, the right not to be interrogated outside the presence.
You didn't lose them. They were violent.
No.
They were,
okay.
You were raped.
Okay, I was raped. There you go. I was raped of my rights. The Sixth Amendment rights to a speedy trial, the right to face my accusers in a court of law, the right to know who my accusers are, the right to have a jury trial. All of that was gone. The right to a hearing. I begged the court in tearful letters. I sent letters after letter after letter to my judge demanding a hearing. And then I begged for a hearing. I was like, Your Honor, this is America. You can't do this in the United States. Because when my attorney failed, my beloved, wonderful uncle, who had 40 years in the law, jumped in. And I am not a passive person. I fought. All of us fought, and it didn't matter. They were like, no, the law says no. No, the law says no. And that is, this was the Chief Justice, Michael Mukasey, who is arguably, he has been mentioned for the Supreme Court of the United States. He would later become U.S. Attorney General. He is considered one of the finest judges in the entire country. And he was the one hearing this case. And he was like, the Patriot Act says no. You can't. And I was like, but Your Honor, this is the Constitution.
Congress cannot pass any law it wants to pass. Okay? Congress cannot pass a law that it is prohibited from passing. It cannot change the Constitution by an act of legislation. So why is it that federal legislators are so willing to accept checkpoints all over the country, abusive treatment by TSA perverts of Americans seeking to fly domestically, American Gestapo agents boarding trains and buses and demanding the passengers show them their papers, and any number of modern American realities that more than anything resemble the policies of Nazi Germany? Why are the federal legislators so willing to accept that?
Oh, I am horrified. I'm like, Obama, where did you go? When the Republicans did this, I was furious and outraged. I thought that only a dumb there's some smart Texans. Okay. Ron Paul, okay. I know there's some smart Texans out there. Please don't send me the email saying, there are smart Texans. Okay. A dumb idiot like George Bush who has a very limited education, limited outlook on life, only somebody who's really stupid, who doesn't respect America, who doesn't respect the values of freedom in our country, who's just a whining little boy, a stupid little boy. I despise George Bush. I just despise that man. But what we're seeing is Obama's doing it. Vice President Joe Biden is doing it.
Yeah,
who is there to save us if the Democrats, who have been campaigning that they're different than the Republicans, if they're just the same as the Republicans, how do we justify, how could they, there's been no terrorist attack like 9/11 that would allow them to get away with this. And yet they're on a rampage.
That's why
and if the Democrats are on a rampage, I'm outraged. I'm furious. I demand that Obama veto this thing. I demand.
A Marxist pig. Obama is a Marxist. Karl Marx would give Obama an A+. Obama's not going to do anything at all to compromise the state's control over the people.
Yeah. Well, I want everybody to know what the Patriot Act allows, because this indefinite detention bill transfers authority from the military, but they're trying to make a big stink, a big scene, and try to reassure people and control people and console them and saying, oh no, we really don't change that much. And the reason you should not be afraid, you should not be seduced by that, is because the Patriot Act is already so horrific. It allows the following: secret charges. You are not allowed, I was charged this way. You're not allowed to know what activities you are accused of committing. You're not allowed to know what evidence, the secret charges, secret evidence. The government has no obligation to show that you even participated in the activities.
Bogus and criminal and outlaw, and the government gets its protection and becomes nothing more than thugs who are trying to steal your lives. At that you get a chance to stand up and shoot back. Now, the thing is this: they also allow under the Patriot Act secret grand jury testimony. Now, this is very important because a defendant like me is never allowed to know what acts. Forget the violence. Violence has nothing to do with it. Terrorism is described as free speech. Free speech that criticizes the government, that challenges institutions. Occupy Wall Street is a terrorist movement. Occupy Wall Street becomes a terrorist. By their definition,
we're all terrorists.
Susan, you talk about the problem. What I look for is I want the solution. Okay, I've said I think an armed revolution.
I don't know what the solutions are. I am, you should hear me go, my poor dogs. I have little dachshunds, and they're tiny little dogs, and they have great big personalities, and they're hiding from me this week. They're like cowering around the house because I'm just stomping through my living room, stomping through my kitchen going, what are we going to do to save this country? How are we going to save this America? We have got to stand up right this minute, because if we don't, it is over. Our whole beautiful concept of this free country is going to be gone.
Before we run out of time, I want to go back to a question I asked you at the beginning. Okay, and I'm asking this as a serious question. If intelligence assets around the world are really dedicated to the principles of freedom on which the USA was founded, why do they support these draconian tactics? And why don't they use their skills, and I mean intelligence, they know how to do these things, to overthrow what is obviously a corrupt criminal government?
I'll tell you something. Why aren't we overthrowing our own government? I think I have this horrible feeling that some faction of foreign intelligence, I think that the banksters, I hate to say, some people get very upset with me, the Zionists, who are very threatened by anyone who is challenging the U.S. position on Israel. Obama is so weak. He's such a weak president. I hate to see him and Michelle Obama in any public setting because they're so lost. They don't look like they belong. They don't feel they're comfortable in any state setting. It's like when somebody's really out of their depth, you can see it. And the problem is that I believe that these foreign agencies are doing exactly what you're saying. They are manipulating the heck out of the United States to push the United States into these draconian laws, because they're going to be they see it as they're taking out anyone who's anti-Israeli, anyone who's because the institutions in control are pro-Israel institutions. And probably a lot of your listeners will hang up on the phone right at that point.
No,
how dare you say these things?
I talk about the Israeli terrorist government all the time. And by the way, the definition of a terrorist government, according to Funk and Wagnall's 1953 dictionary, is a government that rules by intimidation. So I am being very specific when I use that term. And I only got about a minute left, but do you think there's any chance that the sheriffs, the deputies, the retired police, all of the veterans might...
Will never happen. There will never be a revolution in the United States. Americans are placated by television. They love Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian is a terrorist. She is destroying the fabric of our society. But we are not. By and large, Americans are sloppy. They're sleepy. They are they're watching they're watching television at night, and that's it. Freedom requires vigilance, and I think we are at the stage, however, when when Thomas Jefferson is correct that the defense of freedom requires the quote, to replenish freedom requires that you spill the blood of patriots and tyrants every so often.
Yeah, the tree of liberty. The tree of liberty must be watered with blood of patriots and tyrants. That's from time to time. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Susan, quickly, how do people get your book?
Extreme Prejudice is available on Amazon and Kindle, and I urge you to get it because the Patriot Act is I lived through the Patriot Act. I'm the second non-Arab American ever indicted on the Patriot Act, and it is an absolutely horrific law. I was locked up in prison on a military base. You'll see it.
We're done.
Take care. Love
Prejudice.
it.
Amazon.com. Extreme Prejudice. Susan, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.